Hello everyone. This video is going to show how I create the stained glass nightlight that has the image of the bird and the rose in it. All you need for this is, of course, the shell that has the image cut out, a couple of toothpicks, paper towel, of course the nightlight base for later, and the required paints for this particular kit. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the flower, which is green and red. Now, most importantly, and you're going to see me harping on this a lot during this video, is when you start with your paint, what you want to do is put a little bit onto the paper towel that you have with you. The reason why you do that is so that make sure that you don't have any clogs in the tip of the paint tube, and also so you don't get any air bubbles when you're putting it onto the eggshell itself. They're extremely difficult to get out of the piercing if an air bubble catches its way into the paint. So what we'll do here is start off with applying some paint to the very tips of the cavities, right there, there, and here. You don't need to overdo it with paint. All you want to do is just get the walls a little bit covered with paint, and then what we'll do is we'll continue on very carefully. Just make sure and put paint along the edges of the piercing. Okay, because this is a narrow cut, it's going to be fairly easy to put the paint in here. All you do is put where you already have paint and use the wicking technique, or surface tension rather, to get the paint into the cavity. Now you can see where there's a little bit of overflow onto the shell. This is what I was mentioning earlier about putting gloss coat on there. It's not a requirement, it's just something that I've learned from experience that helps you clean up the paint if you have excess paint on the cavity. Just with the tip of your toothpick, if you see any paint that went over, just wipe it off with the tip of the toothpick, and then just wipe the toothpick off on the paper towel. Before I apply paint to any of these cavities, even if it's the same color, you'll see me dabbing it onto the paper towel, because every time I pick it up and put it down, I draw air into the tube, into the bottle, and that increases my chances of having an air bubble. And again, those are very hard to get out. Alright, with this marquee shape here for the leaf, all I'm doing is putting paint at the tips. And again, make sure you paint the walls of the cavity here. Now that those are covered with paint, you want to use surface tension to go ahead and apply paint to the cavity. If you see that the film of paint is a little bit thin, you can just go ahead and carefully squeeze the tube and just dab some paint onto the shape. And then again with the toothpick, just clean off any excess paint that you have. Alright, that's it for the green on the flower. So we can go ahead and clean up our tip of the tube. Put that away. I keep calling them tubes and not bottles, but you get the idea. Now we're going to go with red and do the shape of the flower itself. Again, you want to apply some paint to the paper towel. Just make a little bit of a run there. Make sure that there's no air bubbles. Now, as with all the cavities, you want to start at one end and then go to the other end. Apply paint. So now you can go ahead and just connect them along the wall there. And along the wall there. Now, while you're doing this, you want to just barely apply pressure to the bottle. Otherwise, you'll just get glue all over the place. Last thing you want is a bunch of glue on the bottom of the shell, because it's very hard to clean up on the bottom. Alright. So here we've got the first petal of the rose covered in red. I can tell just by looking at this that the center is very thin with paint and the ends are very thick. So all I do with the tip of the toothpick is just pull some paint along. Don't go crazy pushing on that cavity. Just barely run your tip of the toothpick along the top of the paint. If you try to push too far in there, you'll end up breaking that surface tension, and then the possibility of paint just completely dripping down onto the paper towel and all over your eggshell increases a lot. So you want to be very careful. Now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with all the petals. Applying a little bit of paint onto the paper towel. Make sure there's no bubbles. And just repeat. I'm going to always try to make sure and hold on to the eggshell from the very edges, like I'm doing here. Because if you go with your instincts and hold the shell from the bottom, what's going to end up happening is as you fill up all these cavities, you're going to forget that there's paint there, and you're going to touch it from the bottom, and you're going to ruin the shell. So always try to hold it from the edges. Hold it securely, but not too tight where you're going to break the shell. So you can move it around like that. Alright, so we're done with that cavity. And just proceed to the rest of them. The smaller the cavity, of course, the easier it is to apply paint, and the easier it is to control the amount. As we get to the larger cavities in the bird, you'll find that it's a lot more difficult, and you need to be a lot more disciplined in the application of the paint, because it's very easy to ruin it. I've learned from all the nightlights that I've made that I've learned what shapes work best and what don't. With your kits that I sell, you will have included in the kit a half shell, an emu egg half shell, and there'll be several different shapes carved into it for you to practice on before you actually attempt the eggshell itself or the nightlight itself. And you want to get a feel for the flow of the paint and the characteristics of the shell, different kinds of cavities, what to do, what not to do, and that's the entire reason why I provide a half shell, is so that you can practice. You don't want to practice on the actual piece itself whenever possible, of course, because if you make any mistakes on the practice eggshell, well, it's no big deal. But if you make a horrible mistake on the nightlight itself, well, it's a lot harder to clean up. We're almost done with the rose. This last petal here in the center of the rose is extremely small, so you want to be a lot more careful with the amount of paint that you apply. Just a little bit of a dab, and sometimes on these small cavities you can actually just put a big drop of paint onto the to the paper towel itself, pick it up with the toothpick, and fill up the cavity that way. So if you're nervous about putting too much paint in there, that's another technique you can use, but that only works with the small cavities. Trying to do the toothpick technique on any of these larger cavities, you're just going to have a big mess and it's not going to work. Alright, so there we have our finished rose. And we're going to go ahead and go to the bird. All these cavities, we want to just do the same thing. Whenever you open a new bottle of paint, you want to, as I mentioned before, make sure that it's not clogged. There's been times before when I was learning all this that I didn't do that, and I'm pressing on the paint on top of the nightlight, and then of course the clog decides to get opened up, and then I end up with paint everywhere. And although it's easy to clean the paint from the edge of a cavity like this, with the tip of the toothpick, it's much more difficult to clean paint from the entire thing. Again, that's the reason why I provide a half shell for you folks to practice on in the kits. The only spot on this nightlight where we have white, or where we have orange, is the beak. So we're done with the orange, and now we're going to go with purple and the white. You don't want to end up with a dome of paint on this. On the smaller cavities, it's going to be more noticeable to have a dome. But the larger cavities, if you don't feel like you have enough paint because you see it going down, if you have too much paint, you're going to end up with a ball at the bottom of the shell. I can't show you because every time I turn this around, of course, gravity pulls the paint down. But it's okay to go ahead and apply more paint if you see that the film is pretty thin. You want to go ahead and apply more paint. And you can do that once you have the film created. This cavity here, I'll go ahead and intentionally leave it thin for you. It's right there, the film is barely holding together. You can't tell on the video, it doesn't show very well, but it is very, very thin. All I do is apply it to the towel, make sure I don't have any air bubbles, and then drop a little bead on there. With the toothpick, you can see the thick spots and thin areas. You can just dab it very carefully and even out the paint. Now in hindsight, I probably should have done the rows last, because every time I'm moving this shell, it's really hard to not touch the painted areas of the shell, of the rows, with my thumb or my pinky. So I probably should have done that last. But no worries, as long as I'm conscious of it and aware of it, I can be careful with it. Alright, now in these larger cavities, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use the edge of the tip of the nozzle on your glue bottle. And what I mean by that is you've got your paint along the walls of the cavity, and then you're going to drop the nozzle to the edge of the wall, and you're just going to roll it. Not roll it, maybe that's the wrong term, but you're just going to brush it along with the edge of your nozzle touching the actual shell. And that'll help create the surface tension that you need to get the film of paint on there. Now with cavities that have irregularities in it, like this one that has the eye, those are even more tricky. You've got that little protrusion sticking out there, and you got to be a little bit more careful when you're dealing with those kind of cavities. What I do there is just apply paint on the recess there, apply paint there, and then just do what I normally do as far as putting glue in the corners. Making sure there's glue on the walls. Hope you can see this well. Now here, like I said, it's a lot more tricky. You want to be generous with the glue, with the paint. I keep referring to this as paint, or as glue. It's not glue, it's paint. Be generous with it because this is a large cavity. Use the same technique as I did before, where I'm running the edge of the nozzle against this wall here, and then just carefully apply paint. So you can see how that's getting kind of sloppy there. That's okay, we can just clean it up. Got a lot of paint there from the nozzle dragging along the edge of the shell, but I just use the tip of the toothpick and clean off any excess. Now, because of the nature of surface tension, I can tell just by looking at this that the paint is very thick there where the eye is. So just use my toothpick and just draw the paint to the rest of the cavity. And there's that. There's a little dab right here. We'll get that. And there's the head. The other cavities are going to be a little bit more straightforward, of course. They're not rounded. They're just curved with points. Now on cavities like this that are extremely pointy, one of the things you can do is just apply paint as close to the point as you can, and then with the toothpick just draw it to where the point is filled up. One of the things that I do sometimes when I'm doing these night lights, especially if the cavities are very large, I will keep a light close to me like that, and then I will hold up that so I can see where it's very thick and where it's not, and then I'll just get a toothpick and pull the paint where it needs it. Alright. And we'll just keep on continuing the same way. Now, every time you're applying paint here, you want to just barely apply a little bit of pressure onto the bottle so that it releases some paint, but you don't want to do it too much because this stuff will get away from you if you're not careful. But just like this, I'm running it along there, I'm pushing paint out so that it'll connect that film all along that cavity. And again, you can see where it's thick and where it's thin in spots. The larger and wider the cavities are, the more tendency you're going to have for the paint to wick towards the tips. So you might need to, as quickly as possible, draw some paint to the center of that cavity. Get a little tiny air bubble there. Most times you can just fish it out with a dry toothpick. Make sure you wipe off the tip of the toothpick very well. And just try to fish that bubble out. And there it is. I got it with the tip of the toothpick. It's not always that easy, unfortunately, so that's why you keep that paper towel handy so you can draw paint along the paper towel before you apply a paint to the eggshell. Try to get rid of all those air bubbles. And the entire time I'm doing this nightlight, with very few exceptions, I'm always keeping it in my hands. Because I gloss coat them before I apply paint, sometimes they are a little bit slick. Oh my goodness, I got a huge air bubble in that one. All I'm going to do is just try to pop it with the dry tip of the toothpick. If the toothpick is wet with paint, it's not going to pop it. I'm going to try this. It worked. Great. That doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes I have to actually try to scrape out the paint from the inside as carefully as possible. And there you go. That's done. I got lucky on that one. I don't know if you can see me doing this or not, but whenever I'm going to clean off the edges here, every single time I touch the paint, I go on the paper towel and I clean that tip, because if you don't and you keep trying to wipe away paint, all you're going to end up doing is smearing it. You need to have a dry toothpick. Here you want to have a firm grip on the nightlight. Because if this drops while that paint is wet, you can have some splashback. Just all kinds of problems can go wrong. All kinds of things can go wrong. If I'm not mistaken, I think this paint is water soluble. So you could probably, in theory, if you make a mistake and just have a really, really bad turnout of it, you could just soak it in water and it might dissolve it. But because there are dyes in the paint, it might stain the back of the nightlight. Okay, we're done with purple. The last color is going to be white, and that's only on 2 different areas of the nightlight. One of them being a really large piercing. So we're going to go ahead and tackle that one first. Same thing as always, just carefully hold the shell. And then apply paint to the tip. Come back to this other side. Apply paint to the tip, the end there, and then the walls. Now the same thing I mentioned earlier about resting the edge of the nozzle onto one of those walls, and just ever so slightly putting pressure on the tube, on the paint, so that it releases it, and you create a film of paint using surface tension. That was easier than I expected. while I was learning and perfecting this technique, I learned that it's very easy to let the designs get away from you. And when you go to apply paint, it's almost impossible to apply it if the piercings are too large or too irregular shaped. So if you decide to try this on your own with the cutting that you did on an eggshell, just practice, and you'll figure out what works best, what doesn't. Now with this particular cavity here that I just did, I applied too much paint. There, I went ahead and put it back so you can see what I do. To remove excess paint from the cavity, not from the edge on the shell, but from the cavity itself, to remove excess paint, all you have to do is, again, start off with a dry toothpick. And then just touch the surface of that. And then surface tension, you'll grab some paint. You can see it on the edge of that toothpick there. And just remove as much as you need. You can keep checking your work up against the light and see if it's excessively thick or too thin. You can remove paint and you can add paint, but the key is to do it when it's wet. Alright, so I'm going to turn on the hot glue gun, let it heat up while I talk to you some more. Here's the nightlight base. I get these online, and when they come in, they have this little, I don't know why they have it, but there's a little nub right there at the edge. That keeps my eggshells from completely resting on the edge of the nightlight here. So I just get an X-Acto blade and I just trim that off and get rid of it. These are solar sensitive, and of course they're bulbless LEDs. The nice thing about these is the less people are touching these nightlights, the better. You don't want to have to be messing with them when the light gets burnt out, unplugging it, having to change the bulb, or with the on-off switch, constantly having to remember to turn it off, turn it on, and then you increase the chances of it breaking. With these bulbless LEDs, they're solar sensitive, so when it's dark in the room, the light automatically turns on, and when it's bright in the room, it automatically turns off. And of course, with the LED, you never have to change a bulb. So seriously, it's just plug it in, walk away, you never have to worry about it, just enjoy the light. Alright, I should have plugged this glue gun in sooner, that way it would heat up without me having to waste time. But here we are. I wish I had a picture of the half shell that I provided in my kits to show everyone that has all the different shapes on it. I have octagon shapes, square, rounded square, ovals, zigzags, lightning bolts, all these different shapes for you to practice on. That way you can get the feel for the paint and get the feel for the eggshell. I don't think I mentioned it on this video. I did on another one that I created. Was whenever you have cavities, you can create cavities at the edge of the eggshell, but be careful because of course that makes it a weaker point. Anyways, if you do cavities on the edge, try to make them as thin as possible, narrow as possible rather, because the thicker the paint is, it's going to want to pull. And gravity's going to suck it down to the edge right here because of the radius of the shell. I purposely kept these narrow here, that way you wouldn't have that issue. But whenever you do night lights, like I've done before, that the entire surface has detail on it, you definitely want to be very aware and careful that the paint doesn't pull up at the edges and you end up with an extremely thick spot where the light doesn't shine through, and the thin spot where it's doesn't have any color because the paint was applied too thin. Alright, I think the nightlight or the hot glue is ready. So all I do is I keep the shell in an area where it's easily reachable, because you don't want it to cool off too much, the glue rather. Be generous with your glue and just apply it on the nightlight. Try to do it as quickly as possible so it stays hot. Grab the shell and just put it onto the nightlight itself. Hold on to it as it cools. Make sure it's on straight. Make sure you don't have it leaned back too much to where it's going to end up hitting the wall and breaking when you plug it in, or too forward to where it's too top heavy and it'll fall over when you're displaying it. Alright, now what I do is once it cools off a little bit, I'll look to see where I need more glue. Right here I can see it, so I'll just go ahead and apply some more glue. I apologize because you can't see what I'm doing there, but I'm filling up the gap. Normally I would let the paint dry overnight before applying the shell to the nightlight base, but because we're pressed for time on this video, I'm just going ahead and showing it all to you right now. There is your bird with rose nightlight. And that's it. If you have any questions on anything, please never hesitate to contact me on YouTube or Facebook or on my website, eggshell.com. And I'll answer any questions I can have for you. And if I don't have them, I'll try to find them. Thanks for watching.